A 17-year-old girl and her friend went on a trip across Australia and disappeared without a trace at one point. Despite extensive searches and numerous witnesses, her fate remained unknown for 18 years. When this gruesome mystery was finally solved, it revealed one outrageous fact. The police had everything they needed to close the case within days. However, negligence and unprofessionalism stretched it out for nearly 2 decades. Hayley Dodd was born on November 30, 1981 in England. When she was young, her parents moved to Australia with her and other children, settling in the small town of Mandurah. She was an excellent student, engaged in sports, and planned to study veterinary science or become a school teacher. But before deciding on her future profession, she wanted to travel around Australia. After finishing school in 1999 at the age of 17, she set off to travel through Western Australia with her best friend Lisa. They planned not just to visit local towns and attractions, but to spend several months away from home, looking for temporary jobs along the way to cover their living expenses, food, and travel. They'd planned to hitchhike between cities, which in the 90s in Australia didn't seem too dangerous. At that time, there were several cases of female hitchhikers being murdered, but compared to the overall number of people hitchhiking safely, these crimes did not cause widespread fear. However, Hayley feared her parents would not allow her to travel this way, even with a friend. Therefore, she assured them she planned to travel by bus. At the end of July, she and Lisa headed to a town called Dongora, where they planned to work on a local farm. They stayed at a special camping site, where for a small fee, one could get a place to sleep. Such places are popular in Australia, mainly because they are inexpensive. A few days before starting work, Hayley decided to use the remaining free time to visit family friends on a farm 200 kilometers away. She decided to hitchhike there. Lisa did not want to let her go alone, but Hayley insisted there was nothing to worry about and that she would return in a few days. As a farewell, Lisa gave her a foldable knife for self-defense and some change so Hayley could call her from a phone booth. After saying goodbye, she set off around 8 a.m. The family friends on the farm were expecting her arrival, but Hayley never showed up. Worried, they called her mother to inform her. The woman feared something might have happened to her daughter, so she immediately contacted the police. The first thing she did was dial the emergency number and describe the situation. After listening to her story, the operator concluded that nothing urgent had happened. Therefore, he advised her to go to the local police station and file a missing person report. And so she did. Detectives began searching for Hayley, starting by reconstructing the timeline of events. Their first stop was the camping site where Lisa was staying. She was devastated by the news that her friend had never made it to the farm. However, she was able to provide the police with comprehensive initial information. She described in detail all the clothes Hayley was wearing that day and even drew a sketch of the earrings she was wearing for the police. Hayley had bought these earrings a few days before the incident. She and Lisa went shopping to treat themselves to some inexpensive items, and Hayley liked this piece of jewelry. At that moment, she couldn't have imagined that these earrings would become the key to solving the grim mystery of her disappearance. Detectives disseminated information about the missing girl along with her description. Despite being almost 18, Hayley looked much younger. She was 152 centimeters tall and weighed just over 40 kilograms. The police quickly found the first witness, a truck driver who had given her a lift that day. According to the man's account, she knocked on the window of his cabin at a gas station and asked for a ride to the town of Mora, near which the farm was located. The trucker was headed to another city, but he agreed to take her most of the way. He dropped her off at a turn 50 kilometers from Mora, near the town of Badgingarra, where she had to turn onto a dirt road from the main highway. According to the trucker, Hayley was in great spirits. She talked to him throughout the journey and told him about her travels. After she mentioned that she had almost no money, he gave her $15 so she could buy something to eat. The man also gave her his number in case she hitchhiked back. He made trips on this road almost every day and could pick her up again. Later, detectives received several more calls from people who had seen Hayley in that area. Based on their statements, the police concluded that she walked along the northwest road towards Mora. Apparently, she hadn't been able to find a ride at the gas station, so she decided to walk along the road and try to hitchhike. According to the next witness, he gave Hayley a ride to the turnoff to Winjardi Road, after which she continued on her way on foot. The next witness was a woman driving through the area. She noticed Hayley at the moment when the girl got out of the car and walked towards Mora. In total, more than 10 witnesses contacted the police. By piecing together their testimonies, detectives concluded that the girl was last seen around 12 p.m. on the Northwest Road, about 50 kilometers from Mora. However, there was another witness. He hadn't seen Hayley but shared a concerning observation with the police. The man had pulled over to the side of the Northwest Road because of an overheating engine. At some point, he heard a dog barking followed by a piercing female scream. He was unable to locate the source of the sound, as it could have been quite far away. The road ran through an empty plain where there were virtually no other noises. With all this information in hand, the police's forecasts from the start were grim. The lead detective, Eddie Rowe, even decided that they should be looking for a body, rather than considering the possibility that Hayley might be alive. However, the management forbade him from pursuing the investigation in this manner, leaving the case in the status of missing person. It's worth noting that investigating a murder would have given the police more options than a missing person case. But without any leads to follow, the police quickly began searching for potential abductors. In a short time, they identified several dozen suspects living in the area, but ultimately, the police focused on 3 men. One worked as a teacher at the local school, the second was a part-time gardener there, and the third lived not far from where Hayley disappeared. During questioning, each of them claimed innocence and provided an alibi. The police could not conclusively determine their innocence, but also could not find any evidence to the contrary. However, the situation soon changed dramatically. A neighbor of one of the suspects, 43-year-old school gardener named Francis Wark, approached the investigators. He told them that on the day Hayley disappeared, Francis had borrowed his car to go shopping in Mora. When the man returned home around noon, the neighbor noticed damage inside the car. The turn signal handle was broken, and there were also visible marks of impacts on the dashboard. The neighbor hadn't even had a chance to ask what happened to the car. Francis came home, dropped his shopping bags in the kitchen, got on his motorcycle, and left. This story seemed strange to the police, and they decided to interrogate Francis again. The man insisted that at the time of Hayley's disappearance, he was many kilometers away from the supposed abduction site. According to his story, after returning home, he immediately went to a party in Perth on his motorcycle. But on that day, he was not destined to reach his destination. On his way, he was speeding and got into a serious car accident, which resulted in him being hospitalized. The information available was enough for detectives to ask a logical question. Why was he in such a hurry? His own statements seemed very odd, and investigators decided to obtain a warrant to search his home. Police examined his residence but couldn't find any potential evidence. They also searched the car and seized the seat covers for experts to analyze in the lab. Unfortunately, all this yielded no results, and Francis was left alone. Almost immediately after this, he moved to the other side of the country in Queensland. The detectives were left empty-handed, and the case went cold. They tried to find new witnesses and evidence that could move the investigation forward, but to no avail. This went on for 8 years until, in 2007, Francis once again came onto the police radar. By that time, he was living in a remote, secluded area in a small settlement. One morning, an elderly couple living next to him were sitting on their porch. At some point, they were horrified to see a girl running towards them, completely naked, her head covered in blood, asking for help. The homeowners called the police. The victim said that she had tried to hitchhike the previous evening. A man stopped for her and offered her a ride. At some point, he told her that he needed to stop by a place for gasoline and to refuel his car. They arrived at a house in the middle of nowhere, and he invited the woman inside, offering her tea. Unfortunately, she agreed. Almost immediately after that, he attacked her and, after a brief struggle, tied her up. For the next several hours, the victim was subjected to unspeakable torment and violence. The attacker also tore off one of her earrings and kept it for himself. As you might have guessed, this man was Francis. By morning, the woman realized she might be able to untie the rope from her hands, then her feet, and run. She loosened the rope, waited for the right moment when Francis was far enough away, and made a dash for the back door of the house. Before leaving, she took off her pendant and threw it under the bed, fearing that the police might not find any evidence of her story. So she decided to leave a personal item in his house, and it worked. The police searched Francis's home, found the pendant, and arrested the man. In court, he quickly realized he couldn't avoid punishment and decided to confess to what he had done. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The Western Australia police, who were handling Hayley Dodd's case, were notified of Francis' arrest, but apparently they were not at all interested. The detectives took no action to revive the 8-year-old case, which was so strikingly similar to Francis' crime. It was only due to the persistence of Hayley's mother that detectives agreed to reconsider the case, But they quickly concluded that there was still no evidence against Francis, and therefore nothing could be done. Over the years, Hayley's family tried to get the police to conduct a thorough investigation, but they were assured that everything possible had been done. Desperate for help from law enforcement, the family spent tens of thousands of dollars on private detectives, all to no avail. A new turn in the case only came 6 years later, in 2013, when an extremely outrageous fact was revealed. It turned out that the police had simply forgotten about evidence that ultimately proved to be key to the case. Forensic expert Tracy Horn requested the reopening of the investigation because, at the evidence storage, they found the car seat covers seized from Francis' neighbor's car in 1999. Shockingly, it was discovered that for all 14 years, they had never been checked for blood, DNA samples, or other evidence. When experts finally examined them, they found a woman's earring that had caught on the fabric of the covers. Using the drawing Lisa had made for the police right after her friend's disappearance, detectives were horrified to realize it was the same earring Hayley was wearing on the day she vanished. But that wasn't all. On one of the car mats, which had also been seized from the car, they found a human hair. DNA extracted from it matched Hayley Dodd's mother's DNA, meaning the hair most likely belonged to Hayley herself. However, this probability wasn't 100%, which greatly complicated the matter and did not allow for Francis to be held accountable immediately. As soon as this news leaked to the media, the police faced a wave of criticism. For 14 years, these pieces of evidence had been lying right under the investigators' noses, yet they had never thought to check them. Naturally, such a discovery immediately changed the course of the case, and detectives went to the other end of the country to interrogate Francis again. At that time, he was still in prison for assaulting a woman in 2007. He told them the same story as 14 years ago, denying any involvement and insisting that he was shopping in Moore at the time of Hayley's abduction. The interrogation, which lasted nearly 4 hours, yielded no results, so the police had to prepare the case for court. This happened in 2015 when he was officially charged with Hayley's murder and extradited to Western Australia. 2 years later, at the end of 2017, the trial began. Francis's defense insisted that all the evidence presented was circumstantial. The earring that Hayley bought in a local shop was very cheap and popular, so it could have been left in the car by another woman. The hair found in the vehicle showed a near-perfect match to Hayley's DNA, but wasn't absolutely precise. Although it would have been highly unlikely for this to be an error, the lawyers found it sufficient. However, all these arguments seemed unconvincing to the judge. Francis might have had a chance to avoid punishment, if not for his crime in 2007. But then, he didn't just kidnap a woman who was hitchhiking. He also took her earring. The prosecution argued that the man collected earrings from his victims as trophies, which only increased the suspicion against him. As a result, the judge found him guilty of kidnapping and murdering Hayley Dodd, sentencing him to 21 years in prison, all while his previous sentence was still ongoing. At the time of the sentencing, Francis was 62 years old. But the story didn't end there. The court believed that Francis kidnapped and killed Hayley, then hid her body. However, it was never found, and the man refused to admit his guilt. Hayley's mother repeatedly appealed to the murderer to disclose the location of the body, but to no avail. In 2018, she helped pass a new law stating that murderers are not eligible for early release if they refuse to disclose the whereabouts of their victims' bodies. In 2020, another significant event occurred. The court accepted Francis' appeal to overturn the verdict and scheduled a new hearing. His lawyers again tried to argue that the man couldn't have kidnapped Hayley in the time between going to Mora and returning home. However, the court believed the timeline allowed for it, especially considering the rush he was in when he got home and immediately headed to Perth on his motorcycle. Moreover, the earring along with the hair remained central pieces of evidence against him. Yet Francis managed to have the verdict altered. The court found him guilty of manslaughter, reducing his sentence from 21 years to 18. Nonetheless, thanks to the 2018 law, he won't be eligible for release, even after serving this term, if he refuses to reveal the body's location. There's another distressing aspect that continues to trouble detectives to this day. They are confident that Francis has victimized many more women, none of whom managed to escape. This maniac could have been picking up girls on the roads for decades, and only he knows what happened to them afterward. One of the most probable similar cases involves a woman who disappeared in late 2005 while hitchhiking to another city and was never seen again. The detective handling the case believes Francis abducted her, as he personally knew the victim, but no evidence has surfaced yet. Perhaps the police will find it in their storage years later, but it's unlikely to change much for the criminal. If the police had examined the car more thoroughly, Francis would have been arrested back in 1999. We can only speculate how many lives he ruined in the years that followed, but this mystery may be uncovered eventually. The early stages of the investigation identified 3 main suspects, including Francis. One of them murdered his wife 5 months after Hayley's disappearance, and another, who was a schoolteacher, turned out to be one of the most horrific child molesters in Australian history. It's regrettable that the police had no means to stop them at the time.